Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well. Of course, it's the start of a new week, which means there is a ton of WWE news and stories to get into today. So let's get into the stories because there is quite a few stories to get into. First, what I want to talk about, of course, is TLC. TLC is the next pay-per-view on the horizon, and Vince McMahon, by all accounts, has approved 4 matches for TLC. Now, earlier last week, it was reported that basically the entirety of the card, maybe for 1 or 2 select matches, was pretty much up in the air when it came to TLC later in December. But apparently over the course of the few days, WWE Chairman and Chief Matchmaker himself, Vince McMahon, has approved 4 matches for the TLC pay-per-view, which of course takes place on December 20th. It's going to be the first WWE event pay-per-view to take place at Tropicana Field. Of course, the first WWE TV will be SmackDown, but it's going to be the first WWE pay-per-view inside the newly revamped Thunderdome at Tropicana Field in Florida. Now, as I mentioned, last week, creative for this event was said to be up in the air as the Vince McMahon and his writing staff and head of creative Bruce Pritchard, executive director, tried to figure out what the card would look like going forward. But according to a new report from Ringside News, so take that with a pinch of salt, they don't have the best track record, but it would appear that the WWE chairman has given the green light for 4 matches for the upcoming pay-per-view. Now, 2 of those are title matches, which is pretty evident as to what happened Friday night on SmackDown, being that it's going to be WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns defending against Kevin Owens. The other being a WWE Women's Tag Team Championship match as Tag Team Champions Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax face off against Raw Women's Champion Asuka and Lana. Again, this is no surprise considering the direction of Raw last week. We saw that Asuka came to the save of Lana over the course of the week on social media. If you follow either Asuka or specifically Lana, Lana has been very much tweeting and hyping up about being potentially Asuka's tag team partner, saying she's a great person, having her back, wanting to hang out and all of that kind of storyline stuff. In addition to that, obviously we saw at Survivor Series and going into Survivor Series, the whole storyline when it came to the 5-on-5 Raw vs SmackDown elimination tag team match for the female side of things was Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler being bullies, bullying Lana, putting Lana through the table 10 million times at ringside. In the course of the match, they even put Lana out on the steel steps and told her, you stand there, you don't tag into the match. And then the finish, of course, was Nia Jax getting counted out along with Bianca Belair after Belair threw her into the virtual audience there in the Thunderdome. And then Lana won the match, being the sole survivor for her team, because Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler put her out of the match, metaphorically, I suppose, by putting her on the ring steps there. So this storyline between Lana and Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler has been going on for almost a couple of months now, I think. So it's no surprise that they're going to actually transition into a tag team match. And who do you get for your tag team partner if you're going to challenge for the tag team championships? You get the biggest and best female wrestler on the Monday Night Raw roster, that being the Raw Women's Champion Asuka. I think it's interesting when it comes to the Asuka side of things because the more I think about it, what has Asuka done on Raw for the last couple of months? Nothing. She really hasn't done anything. And the reason why is because she really doesn't have any credible opponents. She doesn't. There was a couple of Asuka matches I was excited for. I was excited to see Asuka versus Mickie James on Monday Night Raw. Was that the In Your Face Raw? I can't recall if it was exactly that, but that was a Monday Night Raw a few months ago. Of course, we know how that ended with the terrible ref botch where he thought that Mickie James was injured, so he rung the bell. It was bizarre, and they never revisited it. They never revisited that when it could have been something absolutely they wanted to revisit. A lot of people were really excited for that. There was a lot of buzz on social media for that match and potentially a feud coming out of it. We never saw it. Follow that up, you had then had Asuka versus Zelina Vega. Again, a lot of people were excited for that. They did have a couple of matches which people, I think, it was okay. Nothing world-beating or earth-shattering, but it was okay. Since then, realistically, what has Asuka done on the Raw side of things in terms of having a feud? Nothing. She really hasn't done anything. Of course, she had the match against Sasha Banks at Survivor Series, but that was never a feud that was a week-to-week thing. That was never a feud that was developing. That was just, we're going to have that match at Survivor Series. That's what happened. Asuka actually lost the match. First time she's properly lost to Sasha Banks in terms of a pinfall. Obviously, Banks had defeated her earlier the year with the whole BAYLEY 1-2-3. I don't really count that. She beat her by count out on Raw where she lost the Raw Women's Championship to BAYLEY. But Survivor Series, was the first time that we'd seen Asuka actually get defeated pinfall by Sasha Banks. And I just think, what is she doing? She's kind of floundering on Raw at the moment. And again, that's not her fault. The reason why she's floundering on Raw is because she's got no opponents. And she could have opponents on Raw, but for whatever reason, just no one's being put in that position. Give Asuka a feud with Peyton Royce. Give Asuka a feud with even Lacey Evans. I don't care. Give Asuka a feud against Shayna Baszler, even Nia Jax. Give her someone, but they're not. She's just kind of there. She's just kind of the Raw Women's Champion. I think the head honchos of creative, Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon, they're almost a bit indecisive of what to do with Asuka at this point. I mean, she's by far the best female wrestler on the Monday Night Raw roster that's active right now. Of course, you have the likes of Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, all assigned to Raw, but they're not coming back anytime soon. The soonest is probably Charlotte Flair. We don't know the timetable. It's going to be before WrestleMania. Given the time of year it is now, I would expect to see Charlotte Flair probably in January of 2021. It feels like Asuka's just kind of there, hence putting this match with Lana against Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler as just something to do. Let's give Asuka something to do because we don't have anything for her to do right now, which sucks. Now, the other two matches said to be approved by Vince McMahon for TLC includes Jey Uso versus Daniel Bryan. Given the matches they've had on SmackDown, I'm totally fine with this, very excited for this. You have to praise Jey Uso for what he's done over the last couple of months. This is a guy that back in the summer, after his brother got injured at WrestleMania, a lot of people said we're just not going to see Jey Uso on WWE TV. While Jimmy Uso's on the shelf, we're just not going to see Jey Uso. Traditionally, whenever one of them had got injured or in trouble, that was the case. They just disappeared, and once they were both ready to come back, they came back. This time around, I think a lot of people, again, were saying, find something for Jey Uso to do. Just because his brother's on the shelf doesn't mean he has to be on the shelf. And back in the summer, this guy's hosting a karaoke showdown segment, which is one of the worst segments, not only of this year, but up there in SmackDown history. That thing was awful. That thing was just beyond awful. That is up there. I know these are Raw segments, but with Bayley, This Is Your Life, and all that kind of crap, this was up there. The Sami Zayn, Bobby Lashley sisters, in terms of recent years, bad segments, that is well up there. That was, terrible. I think if Fox, when they saw that air, they must have been looking through their contract going, have we got a release clause? Have we got a release clause somewhere? Have we got an out? Because that's the sports-centric programming we were promised for $1 billion. That segment was so bad. That's what Jey Uso was doing back in the summer. Now, he's a main event player on SmackDown. The feud with Roman Reigns was, still is off the charts. It was incredible. Now he's aligned with Roman Reigns. Whether or not he's fully aligned with Reigns, there's obviously some kind of friction there with Reigns berating him, beating him down, falling in line. There is something there still I think they might revisit in the future. Nevertheless, Jey Uso has proved he's a player. He is a major player on SmackDown right now. He owns victories over Daniel Bryan, over AJ Styles. Yes, Daniel Bryan has got his win back. Yes, Kevin Owens beat the hell out of Jey Uso Friday night on SmackDown. Nevertheless, Jey Uso is a main event player now. And I am more than happy to see them revisit that Jey Uso-Daniel Bryan match at TLC because I think in long form that can be a lot of fun. And I think that's probably what we're going to get at TLC. So that's very exciting. And finally, the other match said to be confirmed by Vince McMahon is Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. Now, I don't know. This report doesn't state which version of Bray Wyatt that is. If it's Bray Wyatt, is it going to be the Firefly Funhouse version of Bray? The Firefly Funhouse version of Bray has been showing up on Raw in recent weeks. He even had a match. Was against The Miz on Raw a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually this time last year at TLC in 2019 where the Firefly Funhouse of Bray showed up to face The Miz at that event. So we could have Randy Orton face that version of Bray, but of course Randy Orton has been stalked by The Fiend additionally in recent weeks on Raw as well during this whole deal with Bray Wyatt, recalling what Randy Orton did to him when Orton infiltrated the Wyatt family back in 2017 when they had their 2016 to 2017, they had the WrestleMania match, the WWE Championship match, etc. So I don't know which version it is. I would, to be honest, would prefer it to be Bray Wyatt initially, and then we have Randy Orton versus The Fiend possibly at the Royal Rumble. The issue is with that is what's the situation when it comes to the timeline of the Edge return. I expect Edge to be back for the Royal Rumble. It depends the situation, I suppose, of is Randy Orton versus Edge going to happen at WrestleMania or is it going to happen at the Royal Rumble? It's happening regardless. But in recent weeks, of course, there has been discussions of possibly having Edge and Beth Phoenix versus The Fiend and Alexa Bliss, or Edge and Beth Phoenix versus Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss at WrestleMania, which therefore would shift Edge versus Orton 3 over to the Royal Rumble. So this Randy Orton Bray Wyatt storyline is interesting purely, one, because Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss are the best things on Monday Night Raw right now. They are just the best thing going on that show. Every single week, the creative is off the charts good, and just, it's so engrossing, so interesting. But it's going to be interesting, how long does this storyline continue? Where does Edge follow into this? There's a lot going on there. It's also been reported, as part of this report by Ringside News, that the proposed match between Drew McIntyre and Braun Strowman for the WWE Championship is said to be no longer on the card due to Braun Strowman's knee injury sustained at Survivor Series. We'll touch on that in a second. So, of course, tonight on Raw features Riddle versus Keith Lee versus AJ Styles, with the winner receiving a future WWE Championship shot against Drew McIntyre. That's most likely going to be at TLC. So it would appear that either Riddle, Keith Lee, or AJ Styles will legitimately be the next #1 contender for the WWE Championship. So I guess that will happen at TLC as well. So that will be very interesting. So TLC starting to take a bit of shape now. Interested to see, of course, who wins tonight and faces Drew McIntyre at TLC. We'll be doing a Raw preview later on today, so be sure to check the channel out for that. But I mentioned Braun Strowman's knee injury there. And that's what I want to talk about next, of course, is this injury update when it comes to Braun Strowman. Now, of course, former WWE Universal Champion Braun Strowman last week was suspended indefinitely, I should put that in quotation marks because it's kayfabe, by Adam Pearce on Raw after the Monster Among Men put his hands on the WWE official. Now, Braun Strowman on social media hasn't reacted very well when he was told that he was suspended by Braun Strowman. Of course, as I mentioned, tonight on Raw we'll have AJ Styles, Keith Lee and Riddle face off in a triple threat #1 contender match to determine the #1 contender for that WWE Championship. They're calling it a sudden death triple threat match. What that means, your guess is as good as mine. How a triple threat match is any different to a sudden death triple threat match, I don't know. I really don't know that one. It feels like it's just one of those buzzwords that WWE is going to repeat a million times on Raw tonight, and I just can't wait to not ever hear sudden death triple threat match ever again, because I've already heard it enough times in the adverts that we've seen. But when it comes to Braun Strowman's injury, on the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer has provided an update on Braun Strowman. Meltzer said that Strowman may be dealing with a knee injury at the moment, although he didn't know how serious it was. Meltzer added that he felt the injury could keep Braun Strowman off the pay-per-view next month, TLC pay-per-view of course. Meltzer also said that he believed the winner of the triple threat match that we were just talking about on Raw will get the title shot. So he said, and this is a quote, real quick on Strowman. So Braun Strowman does have a knee injury because he's being treated for it. I don't know the severity of it. The impression I have is that he's not going to be at TLC. I mean, I think the three-way is going to be for the spot, but I don't know that 100%. I don't know if anyone knows. You know, from what someone told me, the writing team still thinks it's Strowman. After Monday, I'd heard that part of the writing team still thinks it's Strowman. You know, it's probably not. So that's the story with Strowman. There definitely was a knee injury involved there, so that's the story. So we'll have to wait and see what the situation is with Braun Strowman. What I do want to mention when it comes to Dave Meltzer, now I'm not one of those people that is just, you know, dump on Dave Meltzer all the time. Oh, he's not credible, because the guy has a history, right? He's broken a lot of stories. He has been doing this for a very long time. I'm sure he does have sources and he does get things right. But also, there is a ton of guesswork when it comes to Dave Meltzer, because just factually alone, from what he's reported over the last 7 days when it comes to Braun Strowman and TLC, first of all, the suspension they said it was a work. Then he said that Braun Strowman was injured. Then he said Braun Strowman was going to be the #1 contender. Then he said it was an angle Braun Strowman was going to be in the triple threat match on Monday. It's ridiculous. And there's a couple of other stories we're going to touch on today with Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan. I mean, talk about covering all of the bases here. All of the bases. He's injured. He's not injured. The suspension is a work. The suspension is just an angle and he'll return. He's going to face Drew McIntyre. He's not going to face Drew McIntyre. I mean, that's not news. That is not news. That is covering every single scenario, and then when it comes out that he is injured or he isn't at TLC, or on the occasion that tonight Braun Strowman does come out and become the #1 contender, he can say, look, I got it right. That isn't the case. That's like betting on the lottery and betting every single outcome and going, what a genius, I've won $10 billion dollars or pounds. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. But nevertheless, the more reports are coming out stating that Braun Strowman might indeed be injured, but who knows at this point? Who knows at this point? There have been every single story saying the opposite of each other. I don't know at this point. I just try and find these stories to talk about and share with you and have an opinion. This one is just very confusing to me. Very confusing to me because it's changing every 5 seconds. It really is. Now let's switch gears here to WWE Hall of Famer Devon Dudley. Now, Devon Dudley in recent years has been working as a producer for WWE, but Devon Dudley announced on his podcast known as Table Talk that he's been dealing with some health issues. He explained on the podcast episode that he's waiting for what the doctors will say and it's been a little rough. Now, he didn't explain what these health issues were or are. Quite frankly, it's none of our business, to be honest. The only reason we know about this story and we're talking about it is because he decided to share it. I've always said this with any personal matter, medical problem, illness, anything like that. It's the person's story to share. It's not our story to break or reveal. It's their story to share, and if they want to keep it private, they can keep it private. It's their medical information. No one needs to know someone's medical information unless they're comfortable sharing it, and that's the case here with Devon. But he said during his podcast, quote, "Hanging in there. I've had some health issues, but I'm hanging in there. I miss you guys. Hopefully I'll be back soon. I got to see what the doctors say. It's been a little rough, but I've been hanging in there, doing what I can." Now, PW Insider has expanded on this story and confirmed that Devon has not been at any TV tapings over the last several weeks either for WWE. Of course, if he decides to reveal more information or expand on this, we will discuss it here on the WWE news videos we do on the channel. Nevertheless, fingers crossed for Devon Dudley. Hopefully he sorts out these health issues and can return to WWE in his producer role at the earliest time in which he's healthy to do so. But fingers crossed, sending thoughts and prayers over to Devon. Let's talk about BAYLEY and let's talk about WrestleMania, because BAYLEY has been doing a couple of interviews over the last few weeks and she revealed an interesting tidbit about her plans for WrestleMania 36. Now, of course, there have been a ton of plans in 2020, regardless of pro wrestling, regardless of anything, just in life, that have been cancelled, postponed, or put on the shelf indefinitely when it comes to the pandemic and it comes to events being cancelled, etc. So, of course, WWE was no different when it comes to WrestleMania 36. Obviously, it was scheduled to take place in Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, Florida, in front of 70,000 fans. Instead, it was taped, it wasn't even live, and it took place in front of 0 fans in the WWE Performance Center across 2 nights. But well, of course, what we always associate when it comes to WrestleMania is these grand and over-the-top entrances, and many wrestlers were working on their plans for their grand WrestleMania entrance at Raymond James Stadium before, of course, the pandemic forced WWE to move the show to the Performance Center, and it would appear that BAYLEY falls into that category because, of course, the SmackDown Women's Champion recently appeared, as I mentioned, on Devon Dudley's Table Talk podcast, and she talked about a number of things and revealed the next plans for her WrestleMania entrance earlier this year. The former SmackDown Women's Champion revealed she wanted Hayley Williams from Paramore to perform her entrance at WrestleMania, and they were trying to make it happen before, of course, the pandemic halted those plans. BAYLEY said, quote, "So, before the pandemic, before we knew that WrestleMania was going to be in front of nobody, we were actually trying to figure out how to get that going and how to make it work. Like, we were having phone calls about it, and then all of this happened, but we couldn't do it. So we'll see. I'm never going to stop trying because that's a dream moment for me and a dream WrestleMania moment for me. So Hayley Williams, let's do it. Come on." Now, of course, BAYLEY wasn't the only person that had WrestleMania grand entrance plans cancelled. We know that Becky Lynch was supposed to have this huge over-the-top entrance when it comes to WrestleMania. She was going to be in her truck, right? That truck that she drove into Raw randomly before WrestleMania, and then she drove into WrestleMania. I remember thinking at the time, she drove in that truck to Monday Night Raw at the time, and everyone immediately went, that was for WrestleMania, because WWE obviously had invested a ton of money into getting this Becky Lynch or semi-truck hooked up and have all of this, the Man and Becky Lynch insignia put all over it. I don't know if they bought it, I don't know if they rented it. Knowing WWE, they probably bought it. It's probably somewhere in the WWE warehouse in Stamford somewhere, or I don't know, in a parking garage. Or maybe Becky Lynch has it, I don't know. But they were just like, we are getting our money's worth. We are making sure Becky Lynch drives this a million times. And it sucks. I mean, everything when it comes to WrestleMania being cancelled and being changed and 0 fans, all of that stuff, it's almost a bit of a moot point at the moment because we're living in this reality right now, and that's just what it is. And it is annoying, and it is upsetting that it's been, you know, WrestleMania. Gosh, it seems a lifetime ago at this point. And prior to WrestleMania, when you had like the Royal Rumble, right? I remember seeing all this stuff on social media over the last couple of weeks or so as we get towards the end of the year, and people have been talking about name a moment in 2020 that just feels a lifetime ago at this point, and universally pretty much everyone has said the Royal Rumble, talking about Edge's return, talking about Drew McIntyre eliminating Brock Lesnar, etc. The big crowd, all of that stuff just feels so far in the distance, so far in the past, and obviously when we get back to it, it'll be great, of course, when it's safe to do so. What I did want to touch on as well, though, when it comes to Bayley and these WrestleMania plans is, I was reading this story and I was thinking about whether I was going to put it in today's video or not, and genuinely, for the life of me, I could not remember or recall what the SmackDown Women's Championship match was for WrestleMania. Genuinely could not remember it. And I was thinking, surely she must have been on WrestleMania. You can't have the SmackDown Women's Champion not defend the title at WrestleMania or even be on the show. And it's Bayley. She's one of the 4 horsewomen, one of the cornerstones of the women's division in WWE. I'm thinking she has to have been on WrestleMania. She was. She defeated Lacey Evans, Naomi, Sasha Banks, and Tamina in a fatal 5-way. I think it was an elimination match at WrestleMania 36. Once I saw it, I did recall the match. But I just thought, I remember it and thinking that whole feud, that whole the match, entirely unforgettable, just forgettable, very forgettable. Not a clue that what was going on at the time. I think the plan must have been to have Bayley versus Sasha Banks at that show, and then just plans get changed, plans get altered, and they thought, you know what, postpone it, because remember at the time there was still discussion, is SummerSlam going to take place in Boston? That was Sasha Banks' hometown. That was maybe at the time a possibility. Of course, it didn't happen. But I think that was the plans at the time. But I remember thinking at the time, I have no idea what the match was. And then I went back and saw it and went, oh yeah, there's a reason why I forgot that. Another thing that we were going to discuss is an update on these Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan feud plans. Now, reported last week on this video, or these WWE news videos, that Dave Meltzer had speculated that the plan for TLC was to have Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan. And as I mentioned earlier about Dave Meltzer covering his bases, he definitely did so on this, because of course we know now that Roman Reigns isn't going to face Daniel Bryan at TLC. He's going to face Kevin Owens at TLC for the Universal Championship. Now, in fairness to Meltzer, he mentioned last week that potentially they could hold off on Roman Reigns' Daniel Bryan plans and move him to the Royal Rumble, and that looks like what is going to be the plan here, because Daniel Bryan is scheduled to face WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble in late January. That's according, of course, to the latest Wrestling Observer Radio with Dave Meltzer. Now, reports of this feud happening came out earlier this month, but the time frame wasn't known then, or at least wasn't confirmed then. But at the moment, it looks like, as I mentioned, Reigns is going to be involved in the feud with Kevin Owens after Owens took out Jey Uso on SmackDown. Of course, then Kevin Owens on Talking Smack. You haven't seen this segment on Talking Smack over the weekend. It was absolutely fantastic. You had Kevin Owens facing off with Paul Heyman. They just verbally jousted for 10 minutes. It was fantastic. It was intense. It was in your face. And it looks like, of course, the plans are to have Kevin Owens facing Roman Reigns at TLC for the Universal Championship. For Daniel Bryan, of course, on SmackDown, he faced Sami Zayn, losing via countout. But despite this loss, and despite Daniel Bryan kind of shifting away from this potential Roman Reigns feud, Dave Meltzer has noted it's likely that Vince McMahon will look to build up Bryan as we get past TLC in December. He also said that with Daniel Bryan involved with creative on SmackDown, of course he is involved in the writing process of SmackDown in the same way that Edge is for Monday Night Raw. Dave Meltzer even hinted he will have more say about how this feud will play out. I don't know if he's hinting there that Daniel Bryan is going to book himself to win the Universal Championship. Daniel Bryan, I think at this point has any plans of becoming Universal Champion at all. It really just isn't the case. I think, look, I'm really interested and excited for a Daniel Bryan-Roman Reigns feud. Is it going to happen at the Royal Rumble? Who knows at this point? Who knows? We did have a face-off between them. We did have interactions with them, of course, when it comes to Jey Uso and Daniel Bryan. Looks like we're going to have Jey Uso versus Daniel Bryan at TLC. If we're going to get Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble, that's great. Once again, it just feels like covering the bases with this story. But I think if you look at the lay of the land when it comes to what's going to happen with the Universal Championship and potential contenders out there right now, I think it looks most likely, that we're going to get Reigns versus Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble. we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. We're not going to cover the bases here on this one. We've got some segments also announced for SmackDown this week. 2 segments have been announced for this week's edition of SmackDown. They were announced over the weekend during the New York Giants versus Cincinnati Bengals game on Fox. First up, we have Murphy taking on King Corbin for the second week in a row. Of course, on SmackDown on Friday, Murphy defeated King Corbin with the assistance of the Mysterio family at ringside. Now, first of all, I must say, who cares? I mean, really, who cares at this point if we're going to get Murphy versus King Corbin too? This whole Murphy-Mysterio family storyline, there have been rumours, and we haven't really reported it on here yet because there's been nothing really concrete, but there have been rumours about a potential Murphy and Alea Mysterio wedding angle storyline. I would not be surprised. I will say I would not be surprised if that's the direction they decide to go in. We'll have to wait and see. Weddings do ratings, they always do. WWE loves a wedding and they love chaos in a wedding. It does feel like they planted the seed, especially last week on SmackDown with the whole, is Murphy legitimate? Is he doing this for ulterior motives? Is he just trying to get close to the Mysterio family? Is he trying to enhance his career? I mean, if you've watched the channel enough, you'll know that I'm not a massive fan of this storyline. I don't think many people are. This is the leftovers of the Mysterios versus Seth Rollins storyline, which was needed to be done ages and ages ago, went on for far too long. The whole Murphy, Alea Mysterio element of this is incredibly creepy because of the whole age difference thing as well. Nobody, I think, is really enjoying this. Everyone is a bit off-put by it. And not in the way that, oh, because it makes you feel awkward or because it makes you feel uncomfortable, that's a good emotion it's evoking. Everyone's just a bit like, it's just gross. It's just no one's really interested in it. No one's really enjoying it, I would say. And the whole idea of the wedding angle, look, I think the wedding angle would work for, you know, shock factor and in terms of ratings, and maybe that's why WWE's doing it, because that's all they care about. As far as King Corbin, I was thinking this when I was doing the prep work for this video. I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for King Corbin at this point. The guy's been King of the Ring for over a year. He won the King of the Ring tournament. It was in the summer or the fall. It was more than the fall of 2019. So he's been King of the Ring for over the year. And no one cares. No one cares. It is such an outdated gimmick anyway. It's such an outdated gimmick anyway. The idea that when you win the King of the Ring, suddenly your character decides that I'm an actual king now, and he wears the crown, he carries around the scepter, wears a cape, gets carried to the ring, and he's being called Your Highness, and he's all royal and all this kind of stuff. That is so outdated. That is so outdated, and it hasn't worked the last 3 times they've done it at this point. It didn't work for King Sheamus, when was that, 2010, 2011. It didn't work for King Barrett, I think that was in 2015, and it hasn't worked for King Corbin. It just hasn't. Why? Because the gimmick is so outdated. The only person to make it work in the 2000s is King Booker, because it was so ridiculous and so over the top, but not everyone's Booker T. Not everyone can make that work. The last 3 guys to have the gimmick haven't made it work. Why? Because it's outdated. It's not believable anymore. And what baffles me and just infuriates me when it comes to the whole King of the Ring gimmick at this point is they knew the gimmick didn't work in the late 90s. When you won the King of the Ring from 97 onwards, when you won the King of the Ring, you just won a trophy, or it just helped elevate you to the next level. They just proclaimed, I'm the best. I won a tournament that proves I'm the King of the Ring. Triple H, Ken Shamrock, Edge, Billy Gunn. But nevertheless, you know, was it Kurt Angle? Did he win it as well? Nevertheless, every time they won it, it wasn't the case of being super royal. Kurt Angle did it a little bit, in fairness, but it was all about just proving you were the best. You didn't go way over the top and go back to the 1980s that because you won the King of the Ring, suddenly you turned into a king. It's outdated. It doesn't need to be done. And at this point, I feel sorry for King Corbin, because I know King Corbin has a lot of detractors and haters on social media, said he's boring, his promos are boring, the character sucks, who cares about the character? At this point, that isn't his fault. That isn't his fault. He is trying to do the best with the bad gimmick and bad ideas and bad scripts and bad feuds that he is being given. So I do really sympathise for him. I do sympathise with him, because the irony was, after all this time and after all of this heat and detractors that Baron Corbin had at the time, he started to get over during the King of the Ring tournament. Why? Because he had great matches and he wrestled. Then what happens? He gets saddled with a stupid gimmick and then it just doesn't work. It doesn't work again after it. So, I mean, I feel, like I said, I feel sorry for him. I do feel sorry for him. But as far as that, I mean, who really cares? In addition to that match being announced, also WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns will seek his revenge against Kevin Owens after the post-match attack on Jey Uso on Friday's episode of SmackDown. So we'll see more from that storyline as it develops into TLC later this month. And finally, what I want to talk about is Bayley once again. She's revealed her dream opponent in the WWE. So who would Bayley's dream opponent be? It would be none other than Lita. Bayley has wrestled with pretty much every female wrestler on the roster at this point, so she cited one of her childhood heroes as someone she wants to step into the ring with in the future. She said, quote, Lita has always been a dream opponent because she's just someone I've never been in the ring with, which is crazy to say now, but we've been in a 10-man tag team match before. This was the night after Evolution. That was so insane. She did the moonsault. I did the elbow off the top. We did Twist of Fates. It was so crazy, but I want to match against her because she's the one who helped me realize my dreams. She made me really see women who look different and dress differently can make it in this business and be successful. So I'd love to pay her back to her and pay that to my 12-year-old self and have that dream match. As far as a match with Bayley and Lita, could it happen? Absolutely. Why couldn't it happen? The interesting thing about Lita, of course, is the health, her neck. For a period of time, she was on the no touch, no contact list. That obviously isn't the case because in recent years she's made appearances, whether it's in the Women's Royal Rumble or at Evolution, etc. So is it out of the realm of possibility? Absolutely not. Will we see it? I don't know. Maybe she is done in the ring, but who knows at this point? It would be a fun match to see, right? Who wouldn't want to see that? But of course, as always, all of these news stories today are just one man's opinion. So what are your thoughts on the news stories that we have touched on today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chat about WWE, AEW, Impact, all of that fun stuff here on the channel. So be sure to leave your thoughts below and I'll do my best to respond and reply. If you have enjoyed this video, of course, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.